Between its original 1982 release and today's 2024 iteration, the iconic Microsoft Flight Simulator series has charted the rise and rise of 3D graphics technology. Even now, it represents the cutting edge in a certain, rarely explored discipline in open-world rendering. One of Flight Simulator's many hooks is simply this: pick any starting point you'd like on the globe, pick your plane, and within moments you're flying. It's a thing of wonder to see familiar landmarks whiz by across London, Paris, New York, or even the climbs of the Himalayas. Flight Simulator 2024 iterates on the features and technology of its 2020 version, which we first covered at launch on Xbox Series X, S, and PC. Today though, developer Asobo Studio brings that very same impressive world streaming and cloud simulation tech to Sony's platforms. But is there parity in features here? Secondly, what does PS5 Pro get in terms of visual enhancements over the top? And finally, how do the consoles compare in performance with unlocked frame rates at 120Hz? Let's find out.
This video is brought to you by Digital Foundry and ExpressVPN. Using a VPN is swiftly becoming essential. It's an extra layer of personal security that enhances your privacy online, protecting your browser history while preventing your ISP from logging your activity on the internet. ExpressVPN wraps your traffic in an encrypted tunnel, rerouting 100% of your network traffic through secure servers. ExpressVPN has servers in 105 different countries that you can choose from, good for accessing region-locked content and services, or for remaining virtually local when traveling overseas. Rated as the #1 VPN by sites including The Verge and CNET, ExpressVPN starts from $3.49 or £2.49 in the UK per month for the basic plan, with up to 10 simultaneous connections, ad blocker, and malicious site protection. Advanced and Pro plans feature more connections, more advanced protection, a password manager, and further features. Scan the QR code or go to expressvpn.com/foundry and find out how you can get up to 4 extra months thanks to our sponsor, ExpressVPN.
Before we kick off, there's a key point to make on install sizes. Flight Simulator's install size by default is small at 28GB on PS5, which accounts for just a base installation. Most of the world's details, however, like buildings, airports, and terrain geometry, are streamed in as needed through an online connection. In fact, there's a setting to adjust how much bandwidth should be assigned for the task, as hopping around the globe can get rather data heavy. This streaming system works brilliantly overall, but even on a decent fiber connection in my case, there are still some bandwidth limits at times. As a result, different flights across the same region will have randomized levels of pop-in, making comparisons of draw distances with Xbox or PC an imprecise art. An extra spanner in the works is that PS5 versions of the game, as of this video going live anyway, have no ability to download this data locally. The feature is missing. On Xbox Series X and S meanwhile, you do have that option. Just go to the marketplace and all these world, city, and airport data packs are ready to install to the SSD. The downside, of course, is the sheer volume of data needed to cover every detail. In my case, this complete Series X install bloats to a hefty 480GB or so, with every item committed to local storage. In short, Xbox has this useful extra feature if you've the SSD space for it, while for now it's a shame that PS5 launches without it. With that caveat made, the comparisons are pretty easy to summarize. I've matched the location, time of day, weather conditions as closely as possible using the Discoveries mode on PS5, PS5 Pro, and Series X here. The only variable which isn't easy to control is the volumetric clouds, which distribute a little differently on Series X, and that has a bearing on shadow coverage too. Accepting those details though, the setup is otherwise identical, and effectively we are getting identical visuals on all three, with a few exceptions. Flying over Auckland, we have the world data pack installed to an SSD on Series X, which helps to reduce the regularity of terrain pop-in to a slight degree. Again, there are variances in terms of when a tree or building might switch LOD, but Series X is slightly more consistent in avoiding the issue in my experience. All systems are prone to pop-in though, as you can see, and yes, fundamentally world detail still translates well to PS5 consoles, assuming you've a decent internet connection to stream that data in. In terms of visual settings, you'll also notice that screen space reflections run at the same setting on PS5 and Pro. Sadly, and as with Xbox and PC, this SSR method does cause some expected disocclusion artifacts as your aircraft obscures oncoming terrain, causing blank spaces in reflections on water bodies. It's unfortunate and the main notable blemish on the Flight Simulator package overall. It's even true of the PC version fully maxed out today, and really, it'd be great to see a proper ray traced reflections option added for top-end GPUs down the line. These three consoles are closely matched then, so let's consider the PS5 Pro advantage next. The game's PlayStation website listing has a box out suggesting enhanced Pro performance, improved optimization, and even ray tracing features, but sadly not all of this comes to fruition. Starting with the main upgrade, image quality is boosted to 1800p on PS5 Pro, an increase over the native 1440p on base PS5 and Series X. Also, just as with the other consoles, PS5 Pro's native 1800p is reconstructed to 4K using the game's own TAA option. The net result is that image clarity is slightly improved thanks to more pixels being pushed on PS5 Pro, but there's still shimmer on distant buildings similar to the other consoles. The anti-aliasing behavior is the same, in other words. As promised on the PlayStation website, there's also an improvement in draw distances on PS5 Pro, especially next to the base PS5. This one is best shown off at 10 times speed, and in a break with DF tradition of slowing things down, speeding up the journey and tracking back and forth does help to highlight the difference. Again, bandwidth to the servers is a factor in streaming this world data in, but terrain across the city does tend to render in ahead of time on Pro. Otherwise, there's very little to report on here. PS5 Pro has no graphics toggle, so what you see is what you get once you boot the game up. It also only runs at 30 frames per second on a 60Hz display, just like PS5. SSR quality is the same, while screen space ambient occlusion around the interior of the cockpit runs at a matching preset. So, regardless of console, expect to see ambient shade disappear at the screen's edges as you move the camera. Finally, you'll note PS5 Pro's shadows use the same rasterized setting as base PS5. Hence, PS5 Pro exhibits the same A-list shadow lines across the plane's dashboard here, and it's a missed opportunity to not push for any better. For context, PC running fully maxed out with ray-traced shadows shows the upper limits of what's possible today. Using an RTX 4080, we get to cleaner, more temporally stable global shadows as the plane changes its orientation. RT cockpit shadows is a worthwhile, if taxing feature for PC, since those shadows are so front and center to the experience while in this view. Alas, currently it's not made the grade on PS5 Pro. It would have been nice to have, ultimately, but otherwise PS5 Pro and base PS5 by extension still put in great looking renditions of the game. Switching over to performance, and just as with Series X, both PS5 consoles continue to run at 30fps if you have a 60Hz display attached. This is perhaps expected given the heavy CPU demands of streaming and rendering a rich, dense landscape of detail. In fact, even 30fps is too lofty a target at points for base PS5 or even PS5 Pro to hit consistently. Building dense capital cities, especially once you lower your altitude to near street level, reveal an easy way to get the frame rate lurching into the 20s for extended stretches. It could be Barcelona on base PS5 or switching over to PS5 Pro, Rio de Janeiro. There's no escaping some visible sub-30 drops with a subtle flash of screen tearing at the top too. Broadly speaking, most locales run well at 30fps without issue, but it's clear that there's not much improvement over Series X in this respect. Interestingly, this flight over the docks in Bergen shows drops on Series X, while base PS5 has similar issues in this very same spot. But switching over to PS5 Pro, I had only limited frame drops here, suggesting there may be some advantages on Sony's mid-gen console. Overall, no platform gets by totally unscathed by these sub 30fps drops, but most of the time it will hit the target at least. An extra twist to performance testing is that the game's cap rises to 60fps while using a 120Hz monitor with VRR support. Under these specific conditions, it's technically possible to glance the 60 FPS line while looking right up at the sky, but in practice, PS5, PS5 Pro and Series X are more realistically running at between 30 to 40 FPS in most scenarios. So while flying above cities, it's closer to 30 to 35 FPS on PS5 for example, while flying around less CPU taxing areas like the Himalayas, we'll see that line jump to around 40. It's fascinating to see the actual frame rate's peaks and troughs behind the veil of that 30 FPS cap, and this again underlines where the bottlenecks are. Put in a three-way split, it also allows us to better gauge which platform comes out on top in overall frame rate, where it's a close battle between PS5 Pro and Series X for pole position. Series X only just about edges ahead in tests like this Tokyo flyover by a 1 FPS average, while less CPU taxing spots like Giza have a similarly slight Xbox lead. Ultimately, all performance advantages PS5 Pro might have had appeared to be channeled into pushing a higher 1800p resolution up against Series X's 1440p, and the resulting frame rate is often at near parity. Rome is an exception to this, curiously, where PS5 Pro enjoys a lead out of the three, while base PS5 trails behind by a good 3 to 4 FPS. The bottom line is that getting to a true locked 60 FPS is just not a goer on any format, and this mode is perhaps a better fit for Xbox's VRR support overall, given the system's availability of low frame rate compensation at a system level while dropping under 40 FPS at 120Hz output. Landing on Sony consoles for the first time in its long history, the sheer feeling of awe while playing Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 translates well to PS5 and PS5 Pro. It's all intact. Actual advantages, visually speaking, are rather light on the ground for Pro outside of its 1800p res boost and improved draw distances, and anyone hoping for 60 FPS will be disappointed. In fact, just tackling 30 FPS seems to be enough of a challenge, and dips into the 20s are a reality on all consoles. This was true of Series X years ago, and it remains so on PS5 as well. The only point to be addressed for true parity is the missing download function for world data on PS5 right now. Even if it does take up a sizable chunk of SSD space, near half a terabyte to cover everything, it's a worthwhile feature I think, especially where internet connections are less reliable. Other than that, Flight Simulator 2024 at last opens itself to a new audience, and for those that have yet to experience it, it's a real treat. But that's all from me today. If you did enjoy this video, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell for instant notifications as any new video lands. To support what we do at Digital Foundry, please do check out our Patreon, and to get in touch directly, you know where to find us. But for now, thanks for watching.